We are blessed to have Ted and Janelle Lozier with us.
Amen.
Ted and Janelle are church builders with Continental Baptist Missions. And there's a passage in Proverbs chapter 6 and verse 6. We actually looked at it this morning briefly in Sunday school class, where Solomon says, "Go to the ant, thou sluggard, and consider her ways and be wise." We have a lot of lazy people in this world. And Solomon says you need to go to the ant and look at how industrious that ant is and consider her ways and be wise. Well, I think I could rewrite that verse and say, go to Ted, thou sluggard. Consider his ways and be wise. I don't know if I've ever met any individual or couple that are more industrious, harder working, faithful laborers for the Lord Jesus Christ than Ted and Janelle. Ted is not a preacher, pastor. He is a church builder, literally. He comes alongside of churches and pastors and people and helps build, remodel, makes their churches better, bigger, more efficient, fixed up, better looking, more accessible. And in the meanwhile, as he's doing that, he and Janelle, they are a blessing. They're an encouragement to people. So they have a two-edged sword, spiritually and physically, where they come alongside churches and build and are a great blessing. And the beautiful work on the outside of our church here is because of Ted's siding work and the stone work on the front. Forgot how many years ago that was, but anyways, we're blessed to be the recipients of his industrious work as well. So anyways, we invite Ted to come and minister to us and share with us your ministry, brother.
Thank you. It is nice to be here and be able to report back and be able to do that. We've been on the road, I don't know, on and off. We've gone for 26 days and we put 4,600 miles on our truck, and we were at a bunch of churches and things like that. So it's really great to get out and see the people again. You know, we minister to them. Some of the places we were there in 2013, and now it's it's good to get back to them. So it's always good to come here as well. And I'll show some more slides later in our time here this morning. But this morning I'd like to look at a passage of scripture that we kind of, you turn around and you look, 2018 is gone. What did you learn in 2018? And I kind of look at that and take a review, and then I came up with this idea. Well, the Lord kind of put it in my heart. So 1 Samuel chapter 15. You turn there in your Bibles. We're going to try to cover 3 chapters. I know time flies by fast, but we'll try to stay along as I go through these chapters. I'm reading from the New King James to just clarify where I'm coming from. So 1 Samuel chapter 15, we'll start right there. And just before we do this, have a word of prayer. Father, we do thank you for the opportunity to speak this morning. Lord, be with me. May the words be your words. From your word. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Here, in the first part of this chapter, and I'll we'll jump back and forth as we go. We got Samuel here gives a word from the Lord, and he's going to go to King Saul. And in verse 2, chapter 15, and we'll just kind of go right down through there. Thus saith the Lord of hosts, I will punish Amalek for what he did to Israel. Now, how he ambushed him on the way when he came up from Egypt. Now go and attack Amalek, and utterly destroy all that they have, and do not spare them, but kill both men and women, infant and nursing child, ox, sheep, camel, and donkey. I mean, this is quite a devastating thing, but the Amalek had attacked, and we see in Exodus and Deuteronomy, they had attacked Israel on the way out of Egypt, and it was the rear of the line, the weak part of the line, and the Lord promised them that they would be punished for that, and now we see the punishment fulfilled here. So we see that King Saul, he gets the people together, and he numbers 200,000 men on foot and 10,000 from Judah, and they go and they attack Amalek. But they're supposed to remember, I want you to remember what they're supposed to do. They're supposed to kill everything, destroy everything. But we see in verse 9, go down to verse 9, it says, but Saul and the people, remember, Saul and the people spared Agag and the best of the sheep, the ox, the fatlings, the lambs, and all that was good. And where and were unwilling to utterly destroy them, but everything despised and worthless they utterly destroyed. So they didn't fulfill, what they were supposed to be. Now verse 10 and 11 it says, Now the word of the Lord came to Samuel and said, I greatly regret that I have set up Saul as king, for he has turned back from following me, and has not performed my commandments. And it grieved Samuel, and he cried out to the Lord all that night. So Samuel was very grieved that Saul did not obey. Verse 13, now Samuel's going to go and see Saul. It says, Samuel went to Saul, and Saul said to him, Blessed are you, the Lord. I have performed the commandments of the Lord. We see Samuel says, but what is this I hear? The sheep blatting and the cows lowing. And he says in verse, verse 19, he says, Why then did you not obey the voice of the Lord? And Saul, he tried to kind of blame the people in the first 15 or so. He said, well, the people saved that. And they were going to save it for a sacrifice to the Lord your God. The fatlings and all that, the sheep and the oxen that they saved. I don't know where King Agag and all the other things came in, but anyhow, they were saved those different things. But verse 19, he says, Why then did you not obey the voice of the Lord? Why did you scoop down on the spoil and do evil in the sight of the Lord? And Saul said to Samuel, But I have obeyed the voice of the Lord, and gone on the mission which the Lord sent me, and brought back Agag, the king of Amalek, and I have utterly destroyed the Amalekites. In verse 22 it says, So Samuel said, Has the Lord as great delight in burnt offering and sacrifice as in obeying the voice of the Lord? Behold, to obey is better than to sacrifice. And we see that Samuel then turns and goes from him, and he tells him, the king, he says that verse 26 is, But Samuel said to Saul, I will not return with you, and of course, for you have rejected the word of the Lord, and the Lord has rejected you from being over Israel, king over Israel. And so Samuel now turns to go, and we see that Saul grabs his robe and it tears. And in verse 28 it says, So Samuel said to him, The Lord has torn the kingdom of Israel from you today, and has given it to a neighbor of yours who is better than you. See, the first section here, the king did not obey to the word of the Lord all the way, and now he's been rejected from the Lord. And now we're going to jump down to 16. I'm kind of skipping a little bit. I can't cover everything in the time we have. Verse 16, Now the Lord said to Samuel, How long will you mourn for Saul, seeing I have rejected him from reigning over Israel? Fill your horn with oil and go. I am sending you to Jesse the Bethlehemite, for I have provided myself a king from among his sons. So Samuel's response to that was, well, if King Saul hears of that, he'll kill me. And we see that the Lord reassures Samuel to go and sacrifice there at Bethlehem, and then go there and sacrifice and invite Jesse, his sons, to come. So they go, and he comes close to the city, and they send up the elders are just terrified or afraid. What's Samuel here for? He says he comes in peace, and that satisfies them. They get ready for the sacrifice, and Jesse comes with his sons, and they all go before Samuel, and he's going to be, the Lord would tell him which one to anoint. We see that Samuel, when he gets there, he sees the eldest son. He says, Oh, surely this is the one that the Lord has chosen. But the Lord says the man might look on the outside, but the Lord looks on the inside and the heart. And so that wasn't the one he chose. But as all the sons went before him, the Lord still did not reveal to Samuel who the next king would be. But in verse 11 we see here of 16, it says, And Samuel said to Jesse, Are all your young men here? Then he said, There remains yet the youngest, and there he is, keeping the sheep. And Samuel said to Jesse, Send and bring him, for we will not sit down till he comes here. Of course, they went and got David. David is the one that comes. As soon as David came, the Lord told Samuel, This is the one to anoint for the next king. And in verse 13, Then Samuel took the horn of oil and anointed him in the midst of the brothers, and the Spirit of the Lord came upon David from the day forward. So Samuel rose and went to Ramah. So David's been anointed with oil, and then we see what happened to King Saul in verse 14. But the Spirit of the Lord departed from Saul, and a distressing spirit from the Lord troubled him. And so we see now Saul has a distressing spirit, and his servants around him say to Saul, he says, well, this is from the Lord, and let's find somebody that's a master player on the harp, and they would help you overcome this. And so Saul gives them permission to go find someone to play on the harp. In verse 18, one of the servants answered and said, look, I have seen a son of Jesse, the Bethlehemite, who is skillful in playing, a mighty man of valor, a man of war, prudent in speech, and a handsome person, and the Lord is with him. Quite a good resume, isn't it? And so they go and get David, and they bring him before Saul in verse 21. So David came to Saul and stood before him, and he loved him greatly, and he became his armor bearer. So David became Saul's armor bearer, and it's in the last few verses it says, whenever that distressing spirit came upon Saul, David would play, and that distressing spirit would depart from him. And so now we drop down to verse 17, chapter 17. We see the Israelites are going to war. Philistines are gathered against them. And that's always the case, isn't it? Philistines and Israel are always fighting. In verse 3, the Philistines stood on the mountain on one side, and Israel stood on a mountain on the other side, with a valley between them. And a captain went out from the camp of the Philistine named Goliath from Gath, whose height was 6 cubits in a span. So this is my Goliath. You know, it's 9'9", 6 cubits in a span, is about 3 feet, and then 9 inches on top. So here's Goliath, 9'9". Now he has a robe on here. I say in the Bible it says a coat of mail, and that is a bunch of metal looped together, or it's a bunch of round rings put together, but it's all for protection. It weighs 125 pounds. He has a bronze helmet on. He has bronze on his knees, on his legs, down below, to protect him as well. And he carries a javelin and a spear. And the spear alone, the head of it, weighs 15 pounds. Just to give you a little idea of Goliath. Now, he's coming out from the Philistine army, and he stands before the Israel army. And this is what he is saying. The champion came out, the Philistine Gath, verse 8. Then he stood and cried out to the armies of Israel and said to them, why have you come out to line up for battle? Am I not a Philistine, and you the servants of Saul? Choose a man for yourself, and let him come down to me. So Goliath is putting this challenge out there. Choose a man from your army and come out and fight. And he says, if you lose, then you can serve us, but if we win, you'll have to serve us. That's basically what he's saying. And so Goliath is there, speaking this to him, and he adds more to it, Goliath does, in verse 10. And the Philistines said, I defy the armies of Israel this day. Give me a man, and that we may fight together. When Saul and all Israel heard these words of the Philistines, they were dismayed and greatly afraid. They didn't know what to do. You know, here's this giant. He's 9'9". I mean, I'm 6'1". My wife's only 4'9", but she's a good one to hold up Goliath. And he puts this challenge out to the armies. And verse 12 is kind of a switch in the whole thing. It talks about David, and that he's an Ephraimite from Bethlehem of Judah, and his father is Jesse, and that he has 8 sons. Jesse has 8 sons, and his father was old at that time. Verse 14, 15, and 16 are really important. Get a lot of information here. David was the youngest of the 8 sons. He was the youngest, and we saw earlier he was anointed as the next king. And the 3 oldest followed Saul. So the 3 older brothers of David are at the battlefront with Saul. In verse 15 it says, but David occasionally went and returned from Saul to feed his father's sheep at Bethlehem. And I kind of wondered about that, you know, how did David be in 2 places, you know? He's supposed to be Saul's armor bearer and play the harp and stuff like that, but here it says that David occasionally would leave, because Saul wasn't there. He would leave and feed his father's sheep again. In verse 16 it says, and the Philistine drew near and presented himself 40 days, morning and evening. Now Goliath is coming out, army on each side, valley in between. Goliath comes out 40 days, morning and night, and makes this challenge to the army of Israel. In verse 17 and on, we see that Jesse, David's father, calls him in, And he wants him to take some dried grain, 10 loaves, and some cheese to his brothers and bring back a report on how they are doing. So David, in verse 20, says, so David rose early in the morning, left the sheep with a keeper, and took the things and went to Jesse. It went as Jesse had commanded him. And he came to the camp as the army was going out to fight and shouting for the battle. For Israel and the Philistine had drawn up in battle, army against army. But David got there at good timing. He saw the armies getting ready to go out, shouting and going. David takes his supplies to the supply keeper and leaves them there, and he runs down to the battlefront to meet his brothers in verse 23. Then, as he talked with them, his brothers, there was the champion, the Philistine of Gath, Goliath by name, coming up from the armies of the Philistines, and he spoke according to the same words. So David heard them. Verse 25, so the men of Israel said, have you seen this man who has come up? Surely he has come up to defile Israel. And it shall be that the man who kills him, the king will enrich with great riches, will give him his daughter, and give him his father's house exemption from taxes in Israel. Very important. You know, if anybody goes and fights Goliath and wins, he would be great riches, his daughter, and exempt from taxes. I like exempt from taxes most, but anyhow. So this challenge is out for the whole army of Israel, and nobody has taken up upon it. But with verse 26, we see, then David spoke to the men who stood by him, saying, what shall be done for the man who kills this Philistine and take away the reproach from Israel? For who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defile the armies of our living God? David had a whole different outtake on it. Verse 31. Now, when the words which David spoke were heard, they reported them to Saul, and he sent for him. Now David is before Saul, and then David said to Saul, let no man's heart fail because of him. Your servant will go and fight with this Philistine. And Saul said to David, you are not able to go against this Philistine to fight with him, for you are a youth, and he a man of war from his youth. And David goes on to tell him that as he keeps his father's sheep, that a lion and bear came and would take a lamb from his flock, and he would go after it. And he would strike that lion or bear and retrieve him from his mouth. And if that bear or lion turned on David, David said he grabs it by its beard and he would kill it. So David is defending himself that he could do this. And in verse 36, it says, your servant has killed both lion and bear, and this uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them, seeing he has defiled the armies of the living God. Moreover, David said, the Lord who delivered me from the paw of the lion and from the paw of the bear, he will deliver me from the hand of the Philistine. And Saul said to David, go, and the Lord be with you. I want you to point out, just look at David relying on the Lord. He's not relying on his strength. He's remembering what the Lord did for him as he took care of his father's sheep. And now he's standing before Goliath and the King Saul, and he says he'll go with the same strength from the Lord. And we see that Saul, he wants to help out David, so he gives him his helmet, his armor on, a coat of mail, and all these things. And David didn't even go very far. It says there he just walked a little bit, and he said he had not tested this. And he takes all that stuff back off, tells the king he cannot take it. Verse 40, this is what he takes with him. Then he took his staff in his hand, and he chose for himself 5 smooth stones from the brook, and put them in his shepherd's bag in a pouch, which he had, and his sling was in his hand, and he drew near to the Philistine. So now he's coming towards the Philistine, and it's interesting, Goliath sees David, and he looks at him, and he says, oh boy, he's just a youth, and he's a good-looking kid. It's that. Verse 43, so the Philistine said to David, am I a dog, that you come to me with sticks? Because remember, David had his staff. And the Philistine cursed David by his God. And Goliath says, come to me and I'll kill you so fast that your flesh will go to the birds of the air and the fowl of the air, and then the beasts of the field at night. And we see verse 45, David's response. Then David said to the Philistine, you come to me with a sword, with a spear, and with a javelin, But I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defiled. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hand, and I will strike you and take your head from you. And this day I will give the carcass of the camp of the Philistines to the birds of the air and the wild beasts of the earth, that all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel. David said, it wasn't just Goliath he was going to kill, and the birds of the air and the beasts would take their flesh. It was all the Philistines. The camp of the Philistines would be. Verse 47, then all this assembly shall know that the Lord does not save with sword and spear, but the battle is the Lord, and he will give you into my hand. About then, Goliath was ready to go and take care of this little mouthy kid, I think. And Goliath starts towards David, and David starts towards Goliath. And it's interesting, Goliath is walking, but David is running towards Goliath, it says here. And David reaches into that pouch, and he brings out one of those 5 rocks and puts it in his slings, and he says it hits him right in the forehead, and it sinks into his head, and Goliath falls to the ground. And verse 50 says, David prevailed over the Philistine with a sling and a stone, and struck the Philistine and killed him. But there was no sword in the hand of David. Therefore David ran and stood over the Philistine, took his sword and drew it out of his sheath, and killed him, and cut off his head with it. And when the Philistines saw that their champion was dead, they fled. Well, they didn't abide by the rules, did they? Because as the challenge went out for 40 days, if they won, they were supposed to be their servants. And if they lost, they were supposed to be their servants. But we see in verse 52, it said, now the men of Israel and Judah arose and shouted and pursued the Philistines as far as the entrance of the valley of the gates of Ekron. So they pursued them and overtook them as they ran from them. I'd like to just point out 3 things from these 3 chapters. Chapter 15 is obey his word. Saul didn't obey the word, obey the voice of the Lord, and we see that Saul was to go and utterly destroy the Amalekites. But it's interesting, Saul defends himself a couple times there. He says, but in his own eyes, he said he did obey. And you can see that in the passage. And in verse 22, we read this earlier, but it says, as in obeying the voice of the Lord, behold, to obey is better than sacrifice. So my first point would be, obey his word, and completely obey it. Complete obedience. It's very hard at times, and sometimes I am hesitant to say that complete obedience is very difficult, but we need to be complete obedient to the Lord. Obey his word. Then chapter 16, chosen of God. And the Lord said to Samuel, arise, anoint him, for this is the one. And the Spirit of the Lord came on David. And the Lord chooses us. And no matter who we are or what we've done, the Lord can choose us and use us for him. In chapter 17, the battles are the Lord. Give me a man that we may fight, Goliath would shout out. Goliath defiled the armies of Israel. Saul and all Israel were dismayed and greatly afraid. They didn't know what to do. What do you do with this challenge that is before them? In the same chapter 45, it says, David goes before Goliath with no sword or spear, only a sling in his hand. The Lord will deliver you into my hand, that all the earth will know that there is a God in Israel. It wasn't for his glory, it was for the glory of the Lord. I know, like for 2018, for Janelle and I, we've had some battles that we've been striking. I'm working with Palm off a roof and busted me up, and Janelle finding out that she had cancer and dealing with all that. But this passage, just how David's strength came from the Lord, and it's for us as believers. Whatever battle that we might be fighting, it might be physical, it might be spiritual. It even could be a financial or even an addiction or a relationship. Our battles are the Lord's, and with the Lord, he can be our strength. So in our 3 points, if you can remember, obey his word, chosen of God, and the Lord is our strength. Amen. Thank you. I'd like to show you a few pictures of our 2018 projects that we worked on. We started here in Brookendale. This is Pastor Hammonds, Mike and Holly Hammonds. They were missionaries with Baptist Mission. They're in Brookendale, which is just outside of Ithaca. And this is a struggling church, and they're trying to revive it. The foyer is very large foyer, but very tiny bathroom. I mean, really small. I think it was about 3 foot by 4 foot. And it was the only bathroom on that level. So our main goal to go there was to enlarge this bathroom and make it bigger and take that back room out. So here you can see construction has started. And when we got ready to take the one wall out, we found out that it wasn't held up by anything. So we had to go up into trusses and create a support. And then we could take that wall out down below. Get some of the things all rearranged there, the member of the church helping. Now we got the bathroom rearranged. Of course, in that wall was electrical sub-panel box and all the plumbing had to be moved. And we got all that down there. Ed Bowman is a volunteer that comes and helps us. He's been helping us for about 6 summers now. He lives in Michigan. He takes about 5 months and comes out early in the spring and goes back to Michigan in the fall. Thank the Lord for that. I'm going to tell you just a quick little story. Hopefully I can get it in. We got the bathroom almost done. And the foyer rug, of course, when we rearrange that room, it's all gone and it's all wore out anyhow. And your first impressions when you come to the church is kind of important. And so they said, we'd like to put a new floor in, and we chose a tile, porcelain tile, but we had no money. I mean, we were really about 25 people, maybe 30. And so they said, well, we'll take up an offering in 2 weeks. They'll take up offering. And I figured it was about $4,100 to do this floor. That's just the materials. And so I had little faith. I was packing my bags. We finished the bathroom and we'll move on to our next project. They took an offering. They got $5,100 in. I thought, oh boy, I guess we could put the floor in. So now we're trying to get the carpet up and design it. And the men of the church came out and gave us a hand, leveled the floor up. It's all crooked. And then we started laying tile. And you can see some of the things. And you're trying to tight budget, so you try to do some different creative things. That's why the different style on the floor, just to break it up a little bit different and things like that. This is Pastor Hammond's there working, and this is Holly. So you remember them and getting the floor. Our baseboard, you'll love this. We had no, there's no tight budget, so one of the members, hey, I got a friend that has some wood and it's in a barn, and like, okay. I thought a barn, it might be hay or something. This manure is all covered all over this lumber, and I'm scraping it all off, and everything ran through the plane. It was nice. We made all the baseboard for it, and the Lord provided. A little different style on the floor, but this is what it looks like now as you would come into the foyer. Changed it quite a bit of look. The bathroom is to your left now, and put a little kitchenette in there on this floor. They have another building, connecting building, 2 other connecting buildings, and such large facilities and small amount of people. And so they've actually kind of shut them off, and now they use this as their, like a Sunday evening service to be held here, Wednesday evening service, the fellowship dinners will all be held in the foyer. The foyer is 22 by 40, so it's a good size. So it's neat how it worked out for that. And this is the bathroom that we did finally get done too, with the little interruptions in between. The other building had a sewer problem. Of course, it had to rain. We were just limited time, and we dug it down by hand. We found this squish pipe. That was in the ladder. You can see how oval it is, and that was the trouble. It would block up all the time, so we replaced about 20-some feet there by hand. They have a ministry they call Saddle Up for Jesus. There's some people that have horses there, and so they invite a trainer. And he came from Utah, Bob Toomer, and really a nice guy, a Christian man. He uses it as a ministry, and he'll take that horse, and he's in the corral there, and he'll command that horse to do different things. And I'm not a horse person at all, but so he's going around in a circle, and he's not no rope to him or nothing. He has his rope, cowboy rope I call him. He might be tapping his side, it coaxes him on and stuff like that. But it's really interesting that horse would obey him, and he's trying to explain to you in the scripture how we need to obey the Lord. And then after a while, he says, "This horse is not obeying me." And he's very frustrated. He would describe why he was frustrated. He's putting his head down and shaking his head and whatever. And then he said, when he finally comes to obey me, he will. And, I'm just, when's it going to happen? 10 minutes, this guy's going around and around. Well, after a while, that horse stopped and came right over and just stood right next to him and put his head down. And he said, now he's ready for the next command. And Janelle and Carol got creative with the bulletin board and trying to help fix things like this. All faces welcome. But just the way a lot of people travel. It's on 79 there, and then they are welcome. These are some of the elderly people from there. So we left from Ithaca, New York, Brooktondale. We went up to Michigan now, Curtisville. It's not in the UP, but it's way up in the wilderness. There's not much there. Here's this little church up there, and we are there to do some steeple work. You can kind of look up there and see all the rod around the posts and things like that. Toward the ceiling, down, get into it. Of course, the birds and everything else is up in there. You can see one post is rotted at the top, and my lumber deliveries on the tractor. It's a really nice place to go, real quiet. We can see here's the beam on the sidewalk that is all rotted, and the new one standing up on the sawhorses, ready to go back up. And there it's hoisted up to me, up above. New one's all in place. You can look by the beams, but look, the parsonage is to the right of the picture, and then to the left, our trailer is parked right there. We travel around the trailer. And I got my wife to go up there. And, it doesn't look like we have safety harnesses on, but we do. We're all geared up there. And then after I got the structure fixed, they said, well, can we ring the bell? I said, well, you didn't ask me about ringing the bell. You wanted to stand there. I said, okay, I'll look at it. I said, no, you can't ring the bell. It's all beams underneath that are all rotted. So jack the beam up. You can see my hydraulic jacks there, and we jacked it up. And here it is all refixed back up again. We've got the new beams under the bell, and they're bolted down, and all the new ceiling in. The posts all scraped and painted, so it's in pretty good shape for a few more years. A picture of us working on there. And now we went from way up north in Michigan. Now we're in Ticonderoga, New York, north of Albany. This is my giant, and that's what it looks like. This building was built in 1836, 1869. It either burned down or was rebuilt. But 1908, what you just saw in that structure, it was built in 1908. And I worked on this church 2 years ago on the parsonage. And the last day I was there, it was a Sunday, just after church, one of the members said, hey, do you want to look at the bell tower? I think there's a little issue up here. So we climb up all these holes, and I'm on my Sunday clothes, and I get to the top floor, and this is what it looks like. I said, little issue? I said, you got a big issue here. I mean, this is late fall, it's cold, you know, blowing wind and everything. I said, we can't do anything with this right now. I said, I'll have to come back and look at it. I could not get up to this, above that ceiling to look what was up there. But at that time, from the looks down here, I said, you got issues. So we finally got back there in August of 2018, and this is what it looked like. Just dry rot everywhere. This is literally what it looked like, right there. I removed some of the dry rot there, but there's 16 rafters, okay? And there's 16 rafters in this part of the steeple, and 7 of them aren't touching anything.
Oh my goodness.
So what you're looking at is this cone. You see the nice slate roof? That is the part. This picture right here is what you're looking at from the inside, and this is what it looks like from the outside. So now, the whole idea now is to take that whole thing and jack it up and replace that beam. And it's just like David relying on the Lord for wisdom. I had to rely on the Lord for wisdom because engineers did not want to get involved with such a project. And the more we got involved in it, there's big steel rods that go from that bell tower down, I mean we call it bell tower, but it goes down, the rods go down to a big beam underneath the next floor down, and it holds up that floor, so it's suspended it. So now we're working to hold up the floor tower 56 feet. We have to work our way all the way up. So these are 18-foot beams. We're starting in the foyer, and we got one on the ceiling there, you see above my head, and these posts, we're using economical posts. We got them bridged in. We got up into the bell tower and got the bracing all done. Then we got our jacks in. We took out the louvers and got our jacks in, and then we pushed it up. And just before we did all that, you see all the bricks are rotted here. So we took out 100 brick and replaced them because when we get done, all that beam load will be back on the brick. And we got that all out. So now here's the picture. That whole point of that steeple now is all supported with just 4 legs. And now we can do the work that we need to. And there's the beam. We cut it up in section, brought it down in pieces, but that's what it looked like. And where you see there's nothing, that's where there was nothing. So now to find the lumber for that. I called around, it was $2,000 to buy that lumber that we had to replace it. I wanted Douglas fir, and it had to be full 2 inches thick. And they could give me all the rough cut lumber you want, but it's all green. And I can't have it green, it's going to go into the brick. And so back to my New York City days, I know a lumber yard right in Brooklyn. I said, they have it right in stock. I called them. It was $705. I said, oh, $1,300 difference. I guess we can drive this city. So I drove to Brooklyn and picked it up. And there it is on my truck, ready to go back. It was kind of interesting. And this is a new beam, all recreated from the old one, the sizes and everything like that. You know, some people, this is not all together. It's only fastened together lightly, but it's all in pieces. And when we take it apart, one layer has 27 pieces in it. And now we take it all up one at a time, hoisting it up. We're at 56 feet in the air with our scaffolding. And now we reassemble it piece by piece. We're up in the tower now, reassembling that whole bell tower beam. Now you can see it almost in place now, the drains, one of the members of the church helping out. And you can see it creates an octagon look. You can see the octagon, and that is an 8-sided steeple. 6-sided, 8-sided. There it is, almost completed. We put some internal gutters in case it leaked again. Of course, it will always leak to try to get it to capture that water before it rots the beams down again. And since you're up there, we built scaffolding to do some painting on it since it doesn't get painted too often. This is one of the members of the church, John. He helps us. He rebuilt all the louvers. There's 8 of them down below. Of course, you think you're done, but there's another rotted beam. This is the bell tower down below us. This beam is holding up the bell, which is very substantial weight. And this is what it looks like in the corner that was all rotted. So we had to get in there and build it. We're working in an area that's 18 feet tall. And so we kind of made up some homemade scaffolding in there, working on that, trying to get this beam replaced there. The beam is replaced, and the steel rods in the corners, I had replaced some of them as well. But you can see those are substantial rods that hold up the building. We got all done with that, and the sewer, of course, has been monkeying up at the parsonage for a few years. And so now we're digging up the sewer line. You can see the old one and the new one there. All that rubbish, can you believe it, was on top of the sewer line. It was unbelievable. You know, we finally got that done. Just before we were ready to go from Ticonderoga, it was getting late in the fall, this church in Evergreen, Pennsylvania called me and said, hey, we got a leaky steeple. I said, this must be the year for steeple. So I said, oh, we're about ready to go. I'll stop on the way. So we got there. It was not a very hard job. It was about a 25-footer. And we see that they had put a new roof on and the flashing wasn't done right. The best way to do those steeples is just tip them up and put new roofing underneath, pretend it's not there, and then set it back down. So we took it all apart, re-supported it, and put new plywood down, and got it all back together again. Sometimes you find interesting things. It's a bullet shot, we figure. It came right through here and went out the other side there. I don't know if it was a stray bullet, it was done on purpose, but anyhow, it was a...
Men's breakfast, they had a gun cleaning.
Yeah. But there was a lot of water on the inside of the steeple, so I had to fix that. But this is all completed, all new roofing underneath it now, and they were very pleased because they had been struggling to find somebody to work on that. And it's hard to find sometimes people that work on smaller projects like that for them. But I do thank the Lord that we're able, our ministry really is a lot with struggling churches. We really do work with a lot of them. These are the church here to your right is from Brookendale. There with Mike and Holly Hammonds. The church to the left is one up there in Michigan, the upper part of Michigan. That's the congregation there. And the church down below is in Ticonderoga. These are all the church members there. They struggle along with things, and they usually have the money for the materials. It's very difficult to do the labor part of it. And so we thank the Lord that we're able to come alongside of these churches, encourage them with their building projects. A lot of this is very necessary. And then encourage the people as well as we are there serving with them. So I thank you for supporting us and your prayers for us, and appreciate the time. Thank you.
And that's why we need Ted.
Not just us.
What a great blessing he is, and does stuff that nobody else could do. Appreciate that ministry, Ted, and the blessing you've been to us over the years. Let's take our hymn books, and we're going to turn to number 395. We're going to sing the first verse. And just reminds us, only one life to offer Jesus, my Lord and King. Only one tongue to praise Him. You have one life. I don't know what your skill set is. I don't know what your resources are, your time limits, what God has given you, what your gifts are, your abilities. But if God has saved you, He saved you for a purpose, and that is so that you can use your life to serve Him. And I trust you give that some thought. Maybe you need to do a little bit more than what you're doing right now. or maybe do something a little different than what you're doing right now. But submit, obey the Lord, serve Him with your life. Let's stand as we sing 395, just the first verse. Only one life to offer, Jesus my Lord and King. Only one tongue to praise Him, and of Thy mercy sing. Only one heart's devotion, Savior, oh may it be, consecrated alone to Thy matchless glory, yielded fully to Thee. Amen. Thank you again. Brother Jeff Wagner, if you'd close in prayer for us.
Gracious Heavenly Father, we thank you, Lord, for your love and your grace and your mercy. We thank you this morning for the message that Ted gave us, and we thank you for his visual display as well, and giving us a little understanding of his work. And Lord, it's like Pastor said, like Vance said in our Sunday school this morning, we go to the Ant Thou Sluggard, and we look at the work that Ted's doing, and we just recognize that there's other men out there that wouldn't even want to begin to touch some of that stuff. We just praise you for the wisdom that you bestow upon men when they call on you. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.